Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. At no other time has the nicotine vaping industry faced such intense controversy, under fire for the so-called youth vaping epidemic, and besieged from all sides over the gross allegation that it's responsible for the so-called vaping-related lung illness. The industry, quite frankly, is in a fight for its very survival. While faced with these challenges, the industry has fractured into essentially two camps: the open system segment that spawned and nurtured the industry, and the closed pod system segment, or big vape, such as Juul, that have exploded in popularity and which some say are responsible for the rise in youth use. Tonight in this special edition of RegWatch, we are joined by Daniel David, the President and CEO of VITA, the Vaping Industry Trade Association of Canada. In September, several vaping companies, including Juul and Imperial Tobacco Canada, which sells Vype, and JTI Canada, joined forces to launch the new trade association. Daniel, thanks for joining us today on RegWatch.
Thanks for having me, Brent.
So first off, what is VITA and who are your members?
Yeah, so VITA, Vaping Industry Trade Association. So we are a leading voice for the vaping industry, all sides of the or all categories of the stakeholders. Our mission is really to represent and support the Canadian vaping industry in advocating for harm reduction, youth prevention, evidence-based regulations, and best-in-class quality and safety standards. Our members do include tobacco-affiliated companies like Juul, Vype, and Logic. However, we do also, our board does also contain other sides of the vaping industry, so manufacturing, distribution, and even from to the very small, where we have a director with a couple of vape shops. So, I mean, it's all sides of the vape category.
So is it fair to call the segment Big Vape then?
Well, I maybe not really. I mean, it's the entire category, right? So it's everything from the small vape shop to the distributor to the manufacturer and to the big vape side. So.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, look, before we get into a full deep dive into VITA, we also want to make sure that we spend some time getting your assessment on some of the things that have been going on. So before we do that, let's talk about some of the breaking news today. And first, let's start with the so-called vaping-related lung illnesses that have been covered. We've been covering since August, and that have been dogging the industry, causing, wreaking havoc across the vaping world. And the latest numbers that came out today from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control show that the lung illness crisis continues to grow, with more than 100 newly reported cases and 5 more deaths since last week. As of today, health officials at the CDC say 47 people have died and nearly 2,300 have fallen sick. Dan, what's your assessment now on the health officials in the U.S. and in Canada and how they've been handling the scare?
So, I mean, there's been a lot of information, or well, actually quite a bit of a lack of information during the beginning. One of the challenges here is that vaping as a process is kind of being everything is being thrown into one barrel. What we've seen is a lot of reports that many of the users that are having these types of reactions are coming from products from the black market, illicit products containing THC, and by reporting just that on the process of vaping, it seems to have quite a negative effect right across the board. That just traditional vaping, and as it is here in Canada, that's quite regulated. Has a major impact right across the board, just right on public perception. The feeling is that vaping could potentially be some of what the media headlines are saying, and in all reality, what it looks like here is products from the black market, illicit products containing THC, and there's a lot of media kind of misreporting around that. That scares people.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And then today, the big news in Canada is doctors believe that they may have discovered a new type of lung injury tied to vaping e-cigarettes. And it's it's a significant finding, they say, tied to a 17-year-old in Canada. And we have a piece now, CBS News this morning, which I don't know how they're doing it. Well, of course I know how they're doing it. They're wired directly in with CDC. They're the ones that broke the original story nationally on the lung scare back on August 22nd or 21st, or might have been the 23rd. It was one of those 3 days. That was just such a blur. And they came out, and this is CBS News this morning. So this is their morning show. So today they had a 4-minute piece highlighting the case in Canada, and they used that, of course, as basically, nail in the coffin on vaping. I mean, case is closed. There's so many different aspects now to this vaping-related lung illness. There's just no way that any sane person could doubt the fact that vaping kills. That's 100%. What is in line here, and they got it from Canada. So I've got a piece for us. I've got the story. It's 4 minutes. It's definitely worth us watching the entire thing. Our mics are going to stay on most likely for this, as we always have fun with this. So let's just, I think we're good.
Doctors believe they may have discovered a new type of lung injury tied to vaping e-cigarettes. This finding is linked to a 17-year-old in Canada who nearly died after he vaped THC and also flavored e-cigarettes for about 5 months. His case does not follow the same pattern of lung injury seen in more than 2,000 cases in the U.S. Our Dr. Tara Narula is here with more. So, doctor, why is this case different?
Good morning, Tony. Well, for many years, doctors have known about a type of injury known as popcorn worker's lung, named for factory workers who inhale a chemical flavoring known as diacetyl. That ingredient is used to make buttery microwave popcorn. Now there's evidence it might be responsible for certain lung injuries from vaping flavored e-cigarette products. It's another sign of the types of injury that can occur from vaping. By the time the 17-year-old boy was admitted to an ICU in Ontario, Canada this past spring, what had started as a bad cough had developed into a life-threatening illness. How critical did his condition get?
Extremely critical. He was on life support, and we were concerned that he might not survive. Dr.
Karen Bosma treated the patient, whose family doesn't want him identified. She says what she saw in his imaging didn't follow the usual pattern of vaping-related lung injury that has emerged in recent months, particularly in the United States.
We also did CT scans, and that gives us a deeper look at the lungs. That showed that he had a diffuse pattern. So if you picture the branches of a tree in the springtime when a tree is budding, that's what we were seeing on these images of the CT scan. And that's a pattern that is in keeping with damage.
Doctors diagnosed a form of bronchiolitis, also known as popcorn worker's lung. Small airways in the lungs become so inflamed and obstructed that they cannot expel carbon dioxide, which can then build up in the body to toxic levels. According to the study's authors, popcorn lung is different from the type of injury typically seen in vaping-related illness, where the damage occurs in the tiny air sacs or alveoli at the end of the airway. Both injuries leave patients gasping for air and could cause lifelong lung damage. Just last week, doctors in Michigan revealed one teenage patient required a double lung transplant to survive. And on Wednesday, New York State announced a second death due to vaping, bringing the nationwide total to at least 43. New York State investigators are testing vaping devices to see which compounds may be causing the lung illness. The Centers for Disease Control has identified vitamin E acetate as a common thread, but experts doubt that's the only culprit.
We absolutely continue to look for everything. We have not just sort of say, okay, we have found vitamin E acetate. We will continue to analyze and tease apart whatever chemicals are in the samples.
Both Drs. Zucker and Bosma say regardless of the answer to these questions, the message to teens is clear. No device is safe for them to vape. Dr. Bosma told me she's surprised we haven't seen even more vaping-related lung injuries.
Definitely. There's no teenager in America or anywhere else who should be doing any of this. But
so, yeah. Hold on one second. For some reason. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, so it just took my system a little bit of a hiccup there to get us back. So what did you think about that? It was extraordinary, but I'm going to save reaction for you.
Yeah. So, well, first off, I mean, the very last comment there. I mean, we can definitely agree. I mean, we don't want any youth, non-smokers, anybody underage to be vaping. When they're talking about some of these other issues, as it relates to popcorn lung, the Canadian vaping industry, certainly from a very early stage, we actually self-regulated in some of the absence of federal legislation on this. We had set some standards, testing standards that just to detect some of those compounds, try to get them out of any of the products that were in Canada. That actually started a number of years ago. It was an industry level.
We just lost Dan. And just one sec. Well, we're dialing him in. That is strange. Dan, is that you? Wow, everything is ringing.
Yeah.
Clearly, Tobacco Control is monitoring our signal. As I wear my tinfoil hat, but that was quite strange, considering that we went to a great deal of effort to make sure that you had wired internet and everything else.
I'm plugged in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just I got it.
Okay.
So let me frame this a little bit for our viewers here. So the key thing is that, Daniel, you are one of the most respected vaping advocates in Canada. There's no doubt. You've appeared in front of the Senate, you've parliamentary committees in HESA. You were the executive director of ACTA, which was one of the leading groundbreaking organizations in Canada that was working on behalf of vaping as a tool for harm reduction, setting standards for e-juice and working with vape shops. I mean, you, Shar, John, John Marshall, all of the people working with ACTA, you guys, did great work. And so you've got this experience with with fighting these battles. And we'll deal with some popcorn lung stuff in a bit. It's a disaster. I mean, the article on CBS, it actually says that this is the first case of popcorn lung in a vapor ever. And I'm like, yes. So 5 years we've been hearing about popcorn. It just speaks to the level of propaganda that's out there, that for 5 years they've been screaming popcorn lung and there's never been a case of it. And then now, so talk about searching for a pretext. And that's definitely what's happened here. Dan?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, so I mean, just on that point, I mean, there's a lot of fear around this stuff, and it seems like there are a lot of kind of jumping to conclusions. It could be this or it could be that. One of the things that Vida is really pushing here is evidence-based regulations and decision making. And it really is a crucial part of what we're trying to push and to do here. Vaping really represents a huge harm reduction opportunity to smokers across Canada, and it really deserves that evidence-based review where we're not just panicking over this thing or that thing. We're waiting for all of the evidence to come out. For the studies to be finished, for the investigations to be completed. It's really quite important. And if there is a problem, we need to be able to know what it is and where it's coming from. Because vaping is, again, it's such represents such a huge opportunity, for harm reduction and public health, that we have to take that approach.
And I completely agree. Dan, a lot of our viewers would be fuming a little bit right now because they do see that, the primary members that you have in your organization, Juul and Vype, coming from big tobacco brands, or Juul, which a lot of people just consider as big tobacco. So they really do feel that Juul is responsible for a lot of this mess. And so it's hard to hear that language coming from Vida when they really want to know is, what are you doing about your own members?
So first off, I mean, like, this whole situation, there is no one single cause for youth uptake. There's no single cause for the situation that we're seeing. When it comes down to the health side of things, we could pretty much look at the illicit market. I mean, it's black market products. I mean, at least the majority, and there's more investigation that needs to be done. But a lot of people seem to get caught up in pointing a finger, right? I mean, it's easy to try or to say, okay, this one source over here is the cause, and if we just get rid of that, problem solved. But
let's be clear though. Are you saying that Juul hasn't had a disproportionate impact on the marketplace?
Well, I mean, Juul does have quite a market share in the convenience store type area. But especially as it comes down to health-related issues, I mean, I really don't think that's part of the discussion. It's.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, I agree with you on that. There's no doubt. The key thing is that they've used the so-called youth vaping epidemic, which of course they attach to Juul. I mean, this is what they've done in the U.S. How far they've done that up in Canada, I think Health Canada has been way better on that. But the media here has given no quarter to Juul. They've just, and to Vype, truly, right? So from the moment that former Commissioner Scott Gottlieb got up on September 18th, 2018 and said that there was an epidemic of youth vaping, that was about Juul, and that there was a clear and present danger. He was speaking about Juul, and he is now no longer the commissioner of the FDA, and he hasn't shut up about Juul. It's just Juul. So,
yeah, I think they make a convenient kind of scapegoat, but we can't forget here that we do have a regulated industry in Canada, right? So I mean, there are rules and regulations. I mean, especially when it comes down, ingredients, right? I mean, we can't have things like vitamin E acetate in products made in Canada. I mean, when we have products that are produced by Juul and Vype and Logic, and then the traditional side of the vape industry, we're all needing to be following the same rules and regulations. And that's important. But like I said, I mean, they make a convenient scapegoat because of that kind of tobacco connection, and I get it. But the big picture here is vaping as a harm reduction product is really quite proven. I mean, they do talk a lot about maybe not as enough research has been done, and I mean, certainly more does need to be done. But we do have certainly a decade worth of research. We've got organizations like the Royal College of Physicians and Public Health England, highly respected organizations that are coming out and saying, hey, this is at least 95% less harmful than smoking, which is the cause of the leading cause of death and disease globally. I mean, the opportunity that represents surely demands that we take an evidence-based approach to anything that we're doing in this category.
So how hard has it been, in your mind, to get any kind of airplay on Royal College and Public Health England these days? Because it seems to me that the vaping-related lung illness, first the epidemic, now the vaping-related lung illness has just sucked all of the oxygen out of the room and left no space for this harm reduction conversation at all.
Yeah, well, and that really is a challenge, right? I mean, and if we look at what they do over in the UK and some of the measures that they take over there, they're quite successful. but when we do engage with some of the policymakers, one of the things that we find is that that they're not aware of a lot of these. For a policymaker who is working on vaping regulation, not to be aware of landmark research like Royal College of Physicians and Public Health England, things that are updated every year by respected institutions. There's a problem there, right? One of the things that we really try to do when we go into these meetings and is educate. It's a big part of what Vida was pushing forward, and it's that education piece and really pointing to that, and so on that side of things, we will be coming out with a number of kind of tools just to highlight a lot of the research that's been done. There'll be a system that will be built into our website. The website is still fairly new right now.
It looks pretty good.
A lot of development being done.
Oh, as you can see, we're on the website right now. Looks pretty good.
Yeah, thank you. It's we've got, there's still a lot more that's going to go up. Right now, we have a resources page that's in the works. We've got a number of different resources that's located at the bottom of that page. We have a programs and initiatives committee that's really working extremely hard to build on that that knowledge base, just to collect everything, put it together, make it easily accessible information. That can be referenced to when we do meetings, when policymakers want to find out some information about stuff. But at the same time, we're also going to be doing, we also have things like our fact sheet, easy to understand information for consumers. That's it there, exactly. So, we're going to continue to expand on a lot of these resources as time goes on. But education is a really key aspect of this, and it's one of the reasons why we see this fear kind of spread so rapidly, is that people don't know that this such a large body of research does exist, that it is out there, that it's not really a question of it may be less harmful. It is. And certainly, the best thing that we could do is have appropriate regulations to keep it that way, right? If we have appropriate regulations, we can continue. Innovation can continue to make the product even safer, and we can educate on it and prevent some of the stuff that's going on now.
Sure, and the education part is critical. I don't think there's a single person out there that uses these products, or friends and family of people who use these products, that wouldn't want more education to happen. And I think that's the real big issue. So the U.S. has its problems, so can maybe talk about that in a second. But this in Canada, right in there in the TVPA is the no comparisons clause. You've got all these clauses and clampdowns on the ability to actually get that message out there, and those abilities are going away with each and every single bill that's coming out in each of the provinces and stuff. So because you and I'm going to get us into the advertising and marketing section here in a minute. So let's just set that aside for a second, because there's some common ground between, our position from an editorial position on that's different than some in the open system segment. And I take a lot of heat for it. And we'll talk about that in a sec. Before we do that, let me ask you the tough question. And that's, many of our viewers want to know why millions and millions of dollars have not been spent in the last 18 months to 2 years in Canada by the big players who have the money. And I understand that there was some waiting around for things to get legal, but let's say as of September 2018, how come there hasn't been a flood of money being spent on educational materials on television, in radio, in newspaper by Juul, Vype? How come Big Tobacco hasn't spent their money to defend this industry? Because what's happened is that their entry into the market has put the market in peril, and they haven't done anything to help with that money.
Well, and I certainly I don't work for those organizations. I can't really speak to, the motivation of doing one thing over another. We do have to remember, Health Canada and the federal government sets regulations, advertising regulations. When the TVPA came out. There is an expectation that when you legalize an industry like the vaping industry, getting into kind of advertising things, companies are going to use those mechanisms. When it comes down to education and putting out resources, I would expect that's one of the main reasons why they've been so adamant and so adamant, well, really, on joining and being a part of VITA. We're creating this stuff now. We needed to deliver it in the right way. Putting out information just as, one company here and one company there, it can be inconsistent. If we can put all of this into kind of one area, we can make it consistent. We can make the messaging consistent. Then I think it'd be a lot more effective. And so that's one of the reasons why we have this organization is to do that.
So we could expect to see some mainstream media public relation campaigns to help lift the brand image of vaping then coming soon?
You can expect education. Yeah, certainly. I can't speak to specifics of what will be coming out. Like I said before, there's going to be we're going to continue with these fact sheets. We're going to continue to develop programs and initiatives along that line. Education is a key. It's right on our main page. It is an important aspect. So yes, you can expect more of what we've already done. We're relatively new. And in a short period of time, we have developed some pretty excellent material. We did announce, our launch in September 19th. We have a number of committees that were formed, and you can see that we do have a number of resources that have been developed already. And so in that period of time, imagine we can expect over, the next year, couple of years or so.
So let's take a look at some of these provinces and some of the things that are going on there. So let's look at BC. So BC, what is VITA's position on the BC proposal?
Yeah, so BC was a bit of a challenge for everybody. I think there were some aspects of what happened in BC that we might have seen coming, but there were others that were a bit of a challenge. So really, the flavor aspect of what they're trying to do there, our position on that is really that flavors should be dealt with at the federal level, and there's a very good reason for that. When you start to develop or try to implement any type of regulations around flavors at the provincial level, especially when it comes to vaping products, enforcement gets quite complex. But if things aren't consistent across the country, it doesn't make it very effective. There's ways to get around it. The other major problem is the black market, right? Flavors are a critical aspect of vaping. There's no question about it. There's research to that fact. Trying to restrict them just because there is some youth appeal, you're also at the same time reducing the appeal for adults. And so, there are better ways, and, the federal government, the way that they handled it was actually quite appropriate, because it was more along the line of restricting that advertising and the promotion. So you don't see products that are called gummy bears or cotton candy or some of these other things, because that was implemented when the TVPA came out. Right. So yeah, on that side, it's a bit concerning, and we're going to be doing everything we can to engage with them on that. Equally concerning, there's the nicotine restrictions, and in that respect, those nicotine levels were actually really designed for heavy smokers. And I mean, my mother is actually one of them who relies on a 50 milligram. And if we had lived in BC, come middle of next year, not being able to access that, I mean, the chances of her going back to smoking would be pretty high. And really, it doesn't address the youth issue. There's so many ways that around that. I mean, if somebody wants to abuse a product, they're going to find a way to do it. Reducing the features, the key features that make the product effective, just because they might appeal to youth, and on that basis, I mean, it's not the way to go, and that's not what we would like to see.
Right.
And especially with that kind of patchwork type regulation across the country, it makes it less effective.
Sure. And Dan, you mentioned across the country. They're really across the country when it comes to the youth vaping epidemic. There are three things that are being discussed or implemented across, everywhere. It's the real big ones. Let's leave flavors aside, because I do believe that there's going to be some common sense in Canada on that. And I was happy to see that the health minister in British Columbia, Adrian Dix, I was heartened by his response when it came to flavors. It's like, I mean, how do you ban a flavor, really, is kind of, to paraphrase it. And, having that in adult stores seems to be a good route. But that brings to number one. So I'll just rattle the three things off, if I remember that as three. But one is to severely restrict, or if not ban, the sale of vaping devices at convenience stores. Right? The opponents to vaping would love nothing better than to see not a single vaping device at a 7-Eleven or any other kind of convenience store.
So if we could deal with that, one
Sure.
at a time there, that would be great.
Great.
So with that C-store portion, so I mean, there are a lot of important aspects of having C-stores carrying vape products. I mean, again, we can't forget that vaping is a harm reduction product. And when you're selling the more harmful version, tobacco, at a location, not having vaping products accessible there, or treating them identically to that tobacco product, I mean, it's, first off, not having the access is a really big problem, and not treating them the exact same way is a bit of a perception problem, but the access problem is really important here, because when we look at the spread of vape shops across Canada, one of the things that we can see is that in towns and small cities, population density of less than 10,000, 8,000 people doesn't really support a dedicated vape shop. So C-stores are actually a really key part to have access to retail access to harm reduction products all across Canada for adults. They do have a pretty good success record for age verification as well. But I mean, it really is that kind of access point that's very important, that we want adult Canadian smokers who are purchasing their tobacco products from those locations to have access to a less harmful product at that same location. And at the same time, I mean, it does support the traditional vaping industry, because we have situations then when a smoker buys their first Juul or Vype or whatever it is, they try to, if it works for them, some of the flavors, the limited selection, they end up migrating over to vape shops, and at that point, then the vape shops with their additional experience and expertise can help them further, and it further supports that kind of cessation concept.
And I agree with you 100%. Since the whole Juul conversation started, including obviously in the U.S., RegWatch has maintained the position that ubiquity of devices is the way that you're going to get 38 million down there, another 4 million up here converted. So if they aren't right beside where the cigarettes are being sold, you're not going to get a full chunk of those people properly converted over. The one thing about smoking, that was amazing was that you never ever really ever ran out of smokes unless you're out in the wilderness or something, because there are smokes within 10 feet of you everywhere you go in the world. Sorry, Dan. Okay, well, I
sorry.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
So that argument resonates with me. We've made that argument on RegWatch. We've also made the argument when Open Systems would say, well, it's stealing business and stuff. That wasn't the right way to look at it, because the fact of the matter is that there's a cost in any business of acquiring a customer. But inside the vaping world, there is an additional cost that is prior to that, and that is the cost of converting. So if the cost of converting can be shifted over to pod system devices that are at C-store, that is a cost now not borne by the open system segment of the market. And now your only cost is to market to acquire the customer and to show them the plethora of devices and juices out there that you have. I mean, all of this is a discussion that 12 months ago we were still having, and now people are just recoiled because they're beaten and bruised and they're in a fetal position as states are passing bans and people's businesses are closing, and they're just saying, I've had enough already. Get them out of C-stores, put them in adult only. Please, dear God, do that and save the industry. That's the attitude when it comes to that question.
Right, and I mean that's like I said before. I mean, there is no one solution, and there's no one cause of everything here. I mean, like this youth access uptake. I mean, it does require us to look at this from a few different angles, and really restricting access to a harm reduction product. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I've been in this industry for a very long time. I opened up the very first vape shop in Canada back in 2010. One of the things that we saw kind of early on in this industry was before C-stores really started carrying products with nicotine, they did carry vaping products without nicotine. And what we found was that people would go and they would buy them and they'd be very kind of intrigued. And okay, you know what, maybe there is something to this. And if that product didn't work at that point, it kind of inspired them to go and visit one of the vape shops that was around, and then they could get some more specialized support and help. And really, that now that we have a fully regulated and legalized industry, that works even better. I mean, both sides of the industry are really two sides of the same coin. We don't want to restrict access to either one.
So let's deal with the one of the next big issues, and that is the advertising and marketing. We don't see that much of that in British Columbia, but in Ontario, boy, you sure do. And so, Vype and so forth, you've got all the point of sale advertising at C-store, and then you've got, advertising at hockey rinks, and you've got 30-second spots on television. You've got, it incessantly, which is crazy. Last February, when we were doing all of our Epidemic Canada coverage right before we went to visit Health Canada for our interview with James Van Loon there, I'm doing all my research on all the Canadian news stories, and I'm on Global News reading anti-vaping news stories, and there's Vype banners up at the top, and I'm like, that's crazy. Global will be happy to take the tobacco, the Vype money at the same time as they're running their anti-vaping stories. But the point being, right, is that the anti-vaping forces have got, they've just got, I was going to say a hard on, but I guess this is the internet. I guess I can do that. After the advertising and marketing, we've seen now Ontario banning them. We're seeing that for sure, like major efforts to do that. What's the argument about why there should be a display on a counter at a C-store right beside the chocolate bars?
So listen, like at this stage, really, that there isn't. I think first off,
well, wait a minute. Is the right beside the chocolate bar thing? Is that just a misnomer to frame it that way? I mean, I was using the language of the. Opponents.
So, our position, no, it would be that. There definitely needs to be some other restrictions there, and obviously, the provinces are going forward with that. Really, what should have happened. When the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act came out, a lot more kind of should have been done in that. to address some of this kind of stuff. Really what we saw, there was some marketing that, kind of made it look maybe cool. Really, it should have been more focused, kind of like what the UK does, where it's, this is, your father or your grandmother uses these products to quit smoking, as opposed to some of the other stuff that had gone on. And I think we could have done a better job as federal legislation, provincial legislation, when we realized, obviously a year and a half ago when that came out and legalized this industry, and some of the big players were going to come in and they have that kind of resources, that if it was legal, it was going to kind of happen. So some better rules could have been put around that from the beginning. That doesn't mean to say that there should not, that there should be absolutely nothing, right? I mean, we need to be able to express the message of harm reduction, and that these products are available. I mean, it's not just like a cigarette where it's different types behind a power wall. I mean, you do need a bit more information than that. Really our position with advertising. There's a lot of restrictions coming through. There should be a difference, right? It should not be identical to tobacco. There should be some more on top of that allow us to express some of those harm reduction messages, to give a bit more information on the product, because they are more complex than just a tobacco cigarette. So we do need a bit more, consumers do need a bit more information on that. And that's really the position there. It's not supposed to be glamorized, made into a kind of a cool thing. But I mean, this is in the realm of federal legislation, right? I mean, that's they make those rules, not the industry. So we can't really get too.
Okay, so I'm just gonna interrupt you there for a second, because I'm just listening to exactly what you said. I'm going to point out that some people are hearing that and they hear corporations saying, well, that was the rules that the politicians made. We're just working inside of the rules.
I'm not saying that mistakes weren't made. What the key thing here is that, adult consumers do need to understand that the products are available. That there is more information required to understand them, to know certain flavors, strengths, types of products. It's not as simple of a thing as just jamming it behind a power wall, and then expecting that it'll work. Really, it's where we're at, with the youth issue. I mean, it is a serious issue. It really is. I mean, with a lot more needs to be done. And as an industry, and as an industry association, we're committed to addressing that and to helping and working, partnering with governments to do more. But again, with the advertising, I would just say that it should not be identical to the tobacco restrictions. There should be some leeway on that.
Well, and that's a fair point. Honestly, the libertarian part of me, and I've made this a lot when it comes to point of sale advertising. Again, it's one of those issues where even I have to step back on a little bit because everyone is just so beaten up, right? But, my point of view is that point of sale is such a normal place for brands, regular brands, to have engagement with customers, that it's the last place that's left for the normalization of vaping products, because when you see the thing on the gas handle, or you see the point of sale display or whatever, it seems normal because normal products are marketed that way, and the people that are buying those products are normal people, and they're buying something that everybody agrees and society agrees is a good thing for you to buy. We sell so many bad things to people and don't demonize or stigmatize them for those purchases. But yet this particular product, We turn every single person into the devil who wants to use it. And quite frankly, it's disgusting what they're doing with that. And so I believe that the point of sale advertising, even the way that it's been executed right now, is perfectly fine. And keep in mind that I spent 8 years working with Procter & Gamble in the US and Walmart and in the UK, Sainsbury and Tesco and Asda. And I mean, I know point of sale advertising extremely well, and I didn't see anything in the litany of pictures that I found disturbing, if it's for a normal product, for normal consumers.
Right. And, we really do need those, the authorized kind of harm reduction comparative statements, from Health Canada. We did work with them together on some of those statements. They put out a list of, I think it was about 10 of them, that would be able to be used with vape product advertising. But without that authorization, it's kind of hard to put another message there, right? I mean, if we can't talk about harm reduction, it's just kind of the product makes it difficult.
Yeah, and what makes it even more difficult is that the whole lung illness crisis has shifted the risk profile of the product from harm reduction to as deadly or deadlier than cigarettes. That's the whole thing that's happened here. So a harm reduction argument, where there's going to be oxygen for that, I don't know. But that's exactly why our viewers need to go to support.regulatorwatch.com. That's support.regulatorwatch.com, and dig into that wallet and find a few dollars and kick them over to RegWatch, because as you all know, we're viewer funded and we're industry funded, pretty much the same thing for a lot of cases. And our anchor supporter, Flavor Art North America, Sean Casey, fantastic. We wouldn't be on the air without him. Stealth, who's been wicked. Demand Vape and Juno, that's John Glauser out of the US, fantastic. And our monthly rock stars are totally rock stars. We have room to put people right here. I can put a whole other line right there. And then our one-time heroes have been fantastic. And our brand support, legacy, these are all the fine companies that have worked with RegWatch. Some of them are Vida members, and they're awesome. And we highly encourage you to head over to our site. That is support.regulatorwatch.com. This is our microsite for support only. It's separated from our content site, which is regulatorwatch.com, and help join the war, fighting the war on vaping. Sometimes it doesn't, I'm not sure which side we're on, because we curate both sides, Daniel, to our website. And some people, you've been following us for a long time. You've been on our show before. It wasn't until last February, so it's not even been a year yet since RegWatch has been curating aggressively the anti-vaping articles. We really felt that it was about time that we started making sure our audience and vapors were seeing, in a complete way as possible, all of the garbage out there, all the stories. Let me ask you this. When we first started covering this, and we started curating some of the anti-vaping stories, we got slammed by people in the community, our audience, like literally slammed. And we were instructed that the only way that we were allowed to engage with that content was by taking screenshots of it, and only sharing screenshots, preferably in private groups. I mean, it was totalitarian. And this is from the vaping community. Every single day, I'm fielding comments from our viewers who are upset that we share anti-vaping stories. I wonder that if 5 years ago, the community was making sure that regular people were seeing stories like vaping makes your hair fall out, vaping makes your sperm go dead, vape, all the just crap, right? Then maybe they'd be more able to see that all this propaganda that's going on right now is just a part of that same thing. We all know that it is, but they've got no prior experience with any of the bad news stories.
Yeah, I think the vaping industry, I mean, as it developed over the years, I mean, it did a pretty good job of educating consumers. But again, I mean, a lot of that was focused towards our target market, which is adult smokers, and that target market does not exclusively control public perception. probably there could have been a better job of educating the rest of the the public. But I mean, on that other note, really with this industry, you'll find a lot of really passionate people, kind of out of the box, free thinkers. We all kind of got into this industry during a gray market because we had that firsthand experience and knew what vaping represented to public health and harm reduction. And that same kind of mentality does present some other challenges because, I mean, we all get really angry when, this negative story comes out or that somebody kind of covers the other side. And, balance and everything is really important. That's one of the problems that we're in right now is that, the public really hears one side of the story. And it's the same thing with a lot of policymakers and that they hear one side of the story or they only want to talk to one side. And that really creates a problem. And it comes from, I think, a good place and some of that aggression, but it's not helpful for the industry. Really, I think that what's important right now is that we really work together. I mean, we are facing the biggest crisis that our industry has ever faced, and really, I know I've been here since the beginning. Really lashing out, whether it's at media like yourself or politicians or other vape advocates who just don't agree with you. It's not.
Let me ask you that, Dan. I'm mindful of the time here that we have left. What kind of beating have you been taking? What kind of lashing has been happening at you guys? And let me preface this because you say come together, but you all, the bigger side of the vaping industry has just formed a whole other national association. When, of course, there is the CVA out there, and you used to be with them. So why do we need two organizations? It seems that that's not logical. It seems that there's a reason why there's two is because the working together wasn't happening.
Well, yeah, right, and that was part of the problem, right? I mean, I don't want to talk badly about any other advocacy organization. There are differences in kind of positions. One of the big things for us was that the coverage wasn't there for all sectors of the industry, right? I mean, if you have major players that have major market share in the industry, regardless as to where the background is from, who owns them, I mean, and they have a voice. It is a harm reduction product. And at the end of the day, as a harm reduction product, we all want the same thing, that smokers have access to this product so they're not, killing themselves with tobacco. And so when I say, kind of come together, I really mean on common ground, right? So there are a lot of common ground things that we all share, that if you can't agree on one thing, then let's just focus on the things that we can agree on and work together on that. And that's our position as Vida. We will really work with anybody based on that common ground, CBA, great organization, anybody else. And it's important to do so, especially at this time. And just that kind of infighting doesn't help. It's unproductive. By all means, there's a lot of challenging questions, and we're very happy to answer those. I mean, our organization, one of the big things is transparency. There's nothing to be hidden here. We are on the same side. Ask us the questions. Give us a call. Write us an email, and we will definitely answer. I mean, it's either way. It's really important at this stage for the industry to get involved. We need people to, for our organization. I mean, we're doing a lot of work. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we really need the people from this industry, the free thinkers, the out of the box thinkers, to help us with some of these solutions. We got a lot of ideas and a lot of ways to implement them. We need people. We need people to get involved, and just get involved with something that you can support.
You just had a webinar. I want to make sure we get a discussion in there. How was that? Was there a good reaction? Was there a lot of industry support that came? Yeah,
no, actually, it was a very good reaction. So we had a webinar on Tuesday. We had It was in the middle of the day, but we had 74 members or 74 attendees. It was also recorded, and it's you can see it on our Facebook. So we had a presentation, went through a lot of different aspects of what VITA is, how it works, our committees. Again, very open, very transparent. Really encourage anybody to go and check that out. Industry response was very good. At the end of the webinar call, we actually had about an hour long of question and answers. So and we did manage to answer every question and comment that was placed to us, and we will continue to do so. So yeah, the reaction was quite good.
Well, that's really excellent to hear. So as we're wrapping up here, describe for us what VITA sees for the future of vaping in Canada, and how is it going to help get there?
The future of vaping for Canada, well, I mean, that's kind of a broad thing, but really,
some people, that just means that it's still legal and you can do it.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, that's the big thing, right? I mean, we need to maintain adult access. We need to ensure that we're not impacting the efficacy of the product itself, because if we take measures like that smokers are relying on these things to stay off of cigarettes, and if we impact that, I mean, we're not supporting the harm reduction concept. So those things are very important. It's also really important to I think look at this as a whole, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways I think that we can make an improvement for this industry and education. I mean, certainly the government needs to do some better enforcement. We need to do more research, of course, as well. But there are a lot of ways that we can improve the situation that we're in right now. And I think it just, we need to kind of come together on what we can agree on, and really, we do really need to start talking to policymakers a lot more. But education, because criticizing and just throwing things out, I mean, it's completely unproductive. It takes us in the completely opposite direction. But we have the science and truth on our side. We need to be using it. And we need to be sharing it with everybody, policymakers. I know, unfortunately, there's some challenges on that with federal legislation. But I mean, as much as can be done, sharing the information that is out there, because we have it on our side.
Well, that's very good, Dan. I certainly agree with you there. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us tonight on RegWatch.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Well, that's it for this edition of RegWatch. Please, before you head off, go to support.regulatorwatch.com, dig into that wallet, grab a few dollars, toss them our way. You'll be happy you did. You'll be so happy you did. And of course, we'll be happy too. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. For regulatorwatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.